Hi everyone, on Facebook Live, this is Steve Barrett. I'm the Editor-in-Chief at PRWeek, just about to film our regular weekly podcast, the PR Week, so thanks for joining us, or thanks for checking it out after the event. Please leave some comments, as long as they're nice and clean, and I hope you enjoy the show. We've got Anne McNally here from State Street, the company behind the Fearless Girl statue, so really looking forward to interviewing Anne. Anne, welcome.
Thank you.
And our normal correspondent, Frank Washkuch, our news editor. Hi Frank.
Good to be here.
So we will start recording when I get my incredibly high-tech device set up. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the PR Week, PR Week's regular weekly roundup of everything that matters in the worlds of PR and communications. My name's Steve Barrett. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of PR Week. Going to guide you gently through the next 20-25 minutes as we pick up on another busy week in communications. They're all busy these days, aren't they? And we've got a great guest this week. We've got Anne McNally from State Street, VP, Head of North American PR. And great to have you on the podcast. And of course, State Street is behind the Fearless Girl statue. So welcome to the podcast, and we'll look forward to getting into that.
Thanks so much for having me. I am going to take this recording of that intro and make it my alarm clock.
Oh dear, don't do that. That'll frighten the children. No, well, we like to be enthusiastic about what we do at PR Week. Don't we, Frank Washkuch, our news editor?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Enthusiasm.
Yes.
Yes.
We'll see, Frank starts work at like silly o'clock, 5:30 in the morning.
I drink lots of coffee.
He does drink lots of coffee to get our breakfast briefing out. So you know, this is a long day for him. But so we'll get into the news with Frank after we've talked to Anne. There's a load of usual stories around social media, which we'll talk about. United Airlines, American Airlines, the updates on that. There's the NFL draft this evening, and we have Jeff Pullman, who's moved over to Samsung. So we'll find out about all those stories. But before we do that, Anne, let's get into talking to you. State Street, all of a sudden, everybody knows your name because you got involved in that Fearless Girl statue down on Wall Street. For those who've been living under a rock, just tell us a little bit about what that was and how it came about, because it was a fascinating case study, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been thrilled and humbled by the positive response that Fearless Girl has gotten. And what it stands for us is it's a representation of our investment philosophy. So State Street is one of the third largest asset managers in the world. And as an asset manager, we have a responsibility to steward the assets we take care of. And part of that is working with corporate boards to ensure they're creating long-term sustainable results from a performance perspective. And we really strongly feel that gender diversity on those corporate boards makes a difference for performance. So we asked those 3,500 companies that we invest in to really pursue gender diversity. And as part of that, we placed Fearless Girl where we did.
Yeah, so gender diversity clearly is a problem in boardrooms, isn't it? It's nowhere near 50-50.
Right.
And we talk a lot about that in PR, but that's a profession where 70% of the people are female, and not necessarily at the most senior levels, and we've talked about that a lot in the past. So how did that go down, and what sort of an impact has it made? I always think of finance, maybe slightly dusty, middle-aged guys in suits, pinstripes, Wall Street, etc. Quite a macho male culture. So how do you sort of position that as a philosophy and as a mission?
Well, it's really actually interesting. I've been in every single kind of PR besides financial services. And 5 years ago, I joined State Street, totally jumping into a new sector. And I said, wow, what am I walking into right now? I 100% hand on my heart invited a couple friends over who knew way more about the markets than I did and bribed them with pizza and said, can you teach me about what I'm about to walk into? Because I'm concerned. The financial industry hasn't had the best reputation. And 5 years in, I can tell you that State Street absolutely is a place that takes its values very seriously. And gender diversity has been an internal initiative for us for a very long time, and something that I live and breathe and see every day in our own four walls. And then from an investment philosophy standpoint, through our investments in those companies, through products that we have like the She Gender Diversity Index and ETF, it's a company that really puts its money where its mouth is. So that for me has been fantastic to experience, and not to say that it was easy, but easy to represent because it's authentic.
Yeah. Can you actually go as far as saying, look, I mean, we've seen companies say, look, when it comes to choosing agencies, we're just not going to choose you if you're not diverse and you're not in both in terms of ethnicity and gender. Can you actually go as far as saying, well, look, guys, we're not going to invest in your company unless you are demonstrating the right values and actually doing things in terms of increasing diversity?
Absolutely. So we have a voting capability as investors in those companies, and we choose to engage with those companies and really help them understand the problem of gender diversity and other issues, and work with them to help facilitate that change, because we prefer to be constructive partners over the long term. But if we're not seeing a difference, we vote. We use that voting power to impact change, because we do firmly believe in these longevity issues and diversity issues.
Okay, great stuff. Well, let's get on to Fearless Girl. How did that come about? It's a great idea, very bold. These things can go two ways, can't they?
Yep.
And of course, there was a lot of reaction, both positive and negative. So, but tell us first how it came about, how the idea came about, and then how you sort of executed it.
Sure. So like every big company, we've got a really great integrated marketing and communications team, and then we also have wonderful agencies that support us. So McCann actually came up with this very striking, powerful image. We've been working with them for several years as an agency partner, and had given them a brief to really help us develop breakthrough communications to explain that investment philosophy. And so they came to us with this idea, and it felt 100% natural. And so Stephen Tisdale, our Chief Marketing Officer at State Street Global Advisors, and John Brockelman, the Head of Communications at State Street Global Advisors, came to me and said, what do you think about this? Because it's a PR opportunity, but it's a PR risk too. So we thought through all of those risks and opportunities, and I think the best part about the Fearless Girl idea development was when the idea was presented to our president, Ron O'Hanley of State Street Global Advisors. It took him about 10 seconds to say yes. There wasn't any, I don't know about this, is this, I don't believe in this. It was 100%, we need to do it, let's put our full weight behind it.
Yeah, so instinctively he got it, which is good, and that came from the top.
Now, when you were in the developmental stage of this, what did you see as the risks behind it?
So there were a few. I think any good campaign, as we've seen over the past couple of weeks, is hoping to strike the balance between relevancy and containing your message and owning your message. From a political perspective, gender diversity is highly topical and relevant right now. We didn't want to make a political statement because this is about our investment philosophy, but political risk in it being seen as a political campaign, reputational risk, obviously. Also things like environmentally. There was a march, the No Day Without Women, happening that week. So we had to figure out the right timing, with which to place the statue, and also message control. And so that's something we all think about, obviously, from a PR and comms standpoint. And, we have gotten criticism, which we knew we were going to, that this is a marketing stunt, and this doesn't mean anything, and this is just a way to advertise our product, and the She Gender Diversity Index and ETF, and it squarely isn't. So we were very careful in how we chose to feed the message to the market, working with the Wall Street Journal, and really grounding the message in what's authentic to us as a brand.
What about the practicalities of just putting a physical statue in that space? How did that come about? I mean, what did you have to think about there? I mean, who owns that space? What are the nuts and bolts of it, if you like?
So there was a dedicated team in between SSGA and McCann negotiating that process. You had to apply with the city, and we did, and got a week-long permit. And then because of the wonderful response, we extended that. So it's been a great working partnership and relationship with the city, and their permitting department and the Department of Transportation's art program, which is how Fearless Girl is staying. So she's actually part of that arts program, like the Bull is.
Yeah.
And so negotiating that, we had really strong partners, but it definitely was an exercise right up until the last minute.
Yeah, sure, I can imagine. And Mayor de Blasio seems to be behind it, personally.
Yep.
You got a year's extension. Is it likely, do you think, I remember when the London Eye came in the UK, for example, it was just supposed to be there for the millennium, but then people loved it so much, it's just now a fixture, it's there for all time. Do you see that potentially happening with this, or do you not want to put a hex on it?
I don't want to put a hex on it for sure, you know, and we want to, you know, continue having people support it, and would be thrilled if it stayed. Part of the arts program, what they do is they review their art that they have. There's a ton of fantastic art all throughout New York. So really that's up to them in terms of, you know, the rotations that they have and what they want to do.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of the art is rotated out, isn't it? But I can see this one sticking around personally, but I don't know. We'll see. And then the guy who did the bull statue, he came out with a statement, didn't he? He was a little bit annoyed the way it was all being a bit negative about the bull. What did you make of that? And did you have any communication with him or?
You know, so that was another risk in terms of, you know, response, negative response. You know, and Mr. DeMonico's claims, we have spoken with him. We have reviewed a letter that he sent outlining his complaints, and you know, we're eager to work with him. I think, you know, in terms of that negative response or any negative response, you know, I was talking to a friend earlier and had a similar question to yours. You know, what did you think before this campaign launched? And we didn't think it was going to be 100% positive. No good campaign is, especially when you are striking at the heart of a very important, relevant issue. We knew that it wasn't going to be, you know, sunshine and rainbows with everybody, but decided to do it anyway because it's important to do.
Yeah, we're doing a piece with you, a newsmaker piece with you for our issue in June, and actually I was struck by a quote in there which was from you. Creating dialogue, even controversial dialogue, is how things are changed. And that's it's a great philosophy, but it's so relevant, isn't it? Because there's no playbook for this stuff, really, is there? Especially with social media. The playbook is still being written. Over the past few weeks, it's really come into focus. So sometimes you do have to go on that gut instinct, I suppose, and just sort of say, well, we believe in it. We've thought through as many angles as possible, and we're going to go for it.
Yeah, and it's about doing things that feel right and are right for who you are as a brand. I don't think that this would have had the same impact if it wasn't matched with an investment philosophy that we've had, you know, for years. If we were, you know, XYZ widget company making this call, what is it grounded in? But our ability to impact change is through that investment. You know, so I think the coupling of that is what makes it powerful.
So yeah, you can point to authenticity. I guess finally on this, I mean, people have pointed out that there are diversity problems at State Street, just like there are at any other financial institution. So how did you sort of anticipate that, which you presumably knew was going to happen? How did you sort of get ready for that sort of backlash?
I think my favorite part of this entire campaign was asking that question, and asking that question to our management committee and leadership team, and saying, you know, look, we don't have the best statistics either. We're not at 50-50. Should we be the ones making this call? Unequivocally, across the board, all of our leaders said, just because we're not there yet doesn't mean we shouldn't do this now. We want to be there. We have aggressive gender diversity goals that I see every single day. You know, and we're not where we want to be, but we're doing everything we can to measure and manage that. And we want the companies that we invest in to do the same. Yeah,
it's great stuff. So thanks, Anne. And you can read more about Anne and State Street in June's issue of PRWeek and online. And we'll talk a bit more about the social media stuff in a review. Frank, we're going to talk about that. It's a good segue into some stories we've been running this week. But Nugs for Carter is one of those social media.
Weekly update on
Yes, I mean, is Carter going to get his Nugs?
Well, I hope he does anyway. So he is nearing the right. I mean, we're right up on the cusp of him passing Ellen DeGeneres right now. He may be doing it right as we speak.
I think I saw him on Ellen as well.
It's right.
Doing a selfie in front of the selfie, which is kind of social media eating itself up almost.
So yeah, he's close. And one thing that's really interesting is the amount of social engagement that Wendy's has gotten from sort of daring him to try to hit 18 million, which is that so far this month they've earned 330 million social impressions and 150,000 new followers on Twitter, which is quite a few. And it's also generated 281,000 retweets of its own and nearly 1 million likes. So that's interesting. So, you know, it looks like they may not have to pay him in nuggets, but they've gotten a good response on social.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great, and then we always want to know at PRWeek, are they selling more nuggets, or are they selling more? You know, are they getting more people in store? And I would probably guess that they are actually. You know, I think that is pure. That's a pure
It's
positive
made me think
example.
of chicken nuggets.
Well, there you go.
I mean, I don't know that results in any sales. I haven't bought any from Wendy's, but it's made me think of
It's a
chicken
one-man
nuggets.
sample, but yeah, you know, it'd be good to get the figures, their sales figures, wouldn't it, up to
Yeah.
the next quarter, just to see how that plays out.
And that would be something if on their next sales call they had to address nugs for Carter. So we'll look for that.
Yeah, and the bit I'm always fascinated about as PR Weekend is where does comms fit into this? Because, you know, we were talking about Pepsi the other week, and you just wonder whether the comms team had actually seen that ad, because you do sort of suspect that if they had, they might have said, guys, are you actually sure that this is going to play well? And that's important, isn't it, to have the comms person embedded, talking to and it sounded like you had a fairly integrated team working on the Fearless Girl project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the key word there is integrated. There were so many different kinds of people working on it, from a sales perspective, content, social media. We're also in a highly regulated industry, so a big part of this was understanding those guardrails. For instance, our social program, everything has to go through FINRA. So we've got a wonderful head of digital communications, Lisa Natalicio, and her prowess to navigate all that is SEC and FINRA land when we're talking about millions and millions of tweets, you know, was really amazing to watch. But yeah, no, you absolutely need the two teams talking to each other.
How do you do that in a social media environment where you have to act quickly, but you're in a regulated industry? How do you strike the balance? Because, you know, we've seen, this is on to our next topic really, we've seen with United Airlines that maybe their first response there was a little too led, we don't know this for sure, but we're sort of surmising, it was a little too led by legal, by HR, and it just wasn't showing enough empathy to customers. So how do you get that balance, especially in a regulated industry, on social media? Because sometimes you must be bursting, we've got to do something here,
Right.
but you know, we need to get, do you have to get all these things legal before they go out? Right.
You do, and so we do definitely take a safety-first approach to everything we do on social. And what Lisa's team does is really figure out what platforms we want to be on. So for us, it's LinkedIn and Twitter. It's not Facebook. You know, and that's a brand decision for where we are at this time with the size of our team. And those are decisions we make so we can monitor those conversations. And then to your point about having empathetic communications with your customers, a huge focus for us at State Street is getting rid of jargon. Financial services is 100% guilty of using way too much jargon. It's what got us into the financial crisis. It's a cloak that the industry drapes around itself as a safety blanket, and it's got to go. So that's a huge focus for us, removing jargon from everything we do, from press releases to social posts to, you know, even our earnings communications. You know, and some of what we've done recently is even release emoji packs on how to break down some of this year's most complex regulatory reform in 5 basic emojis.
Wow. So what does it mean for the skills on your team? I mean, the new PR pro has got to have different skills. So they've got to totally get social media. Maybe they need even more of a legal background, or probably legal training has never been a bad thing to have in a PR profession. But, you know, what sort of talent are you looking for, and is that changing a lot?
Yeah, it is. When I look at my team, there are so many different kinds of people on my team. We have a data and analytics woman who speaks 6 different languages. We've got a man who worked on Hillary's campaign. You know, we've got agency folks, social folks, people with no PR background, and it all comes together to be, you know, an important mix of a different diversity of experience. But in terms of focus for PR, in terms of what I look for when I'm hiring, the biggest thing is still the kind of oldest trick in the book from a PR perspective. Can you be a good sponge? One of the things that I think surprises people about State Street and marketing is that you don't have to have a financial services background to work for us. And a lot of the people that I've hired don't. I didn't, and I actually think it makes for a better experience because you're coming in and helping break down that jargon, break down the industry into digestible, understandable information. So I think that definitely is what we look for most, a willingness to dive in.
Yeah, it's good reflections and good advice. Frank, just to wrap this, the American Airlines kind of got in their own snafu with, but they seem to react better than United. And then we had this horrible story of the bunny rabbit, the 4-foot-long bunny rabbit on United. And we don't know how often pets die or animals die on planes anyway, and whether this one was out of the ordinary or not. But United released that report this morning, didn't they? So what's your sort of reflections on this sort of 3 weeks of airlines in social media spotlight?
Yeah, there are a lot happening on the airlines and crisis front, and Delta is the latest addition to that today with a video that came out of an incident earlier this month of a man being pulled off a plane after he ran to the bathroom basically as the plane was taking off. The difference between American and United is American went and apologized quickly and in a human voice, and that's what United mostly failed to do. United CEO Oscar Munoz was on NBC News this morning, and he laid out what's essentially a 10-point plan for new customer policies of the company. A lot of them feel like common sense, which is easy for me to say as an outsider and somebody who's not of the airline industry, but a lot of them just feel like some basic steps towards what an airline would want to do. You would want to have less overbookings. You're not going to, pull somebody off the plane once they're seated, and they're going to give their employees on the ground and on the plane the ability to actually make decisions instead of having to follow the manual point to point. All of these seem very smart, but look, it's a social media age. If there's another incident like this sometime soon, everybody's going to hear about it. So, the proof's going to be in the pudding in the next couple of months. You would think.
Yeah, no, for sure. Interesting you said that about Delta, because we commented, didn't we, at the time where the leggings gate incident, that Delta made a tweet, and we were like, well, there, but for the grace of God. So at some point, everyone's going to be in the crosshairs. So I think most PR pros could sympathise with anyone who gets in this situation, whether it's Pepsi, whether it's United, whether it's American, or last year, Wells Fargo or Volkswagen. Everyone's going to be there at some point. So it's you shouldn't be gloating too much, I don't think. But the bit I find interesting is now everyone knows that there's a ceiling of 10K on the amount they'll give you to get off the flight, and Delta came out and said that.
Incredible bit of one-upsmanship.
And United, it was, and now United's matched it, so it's going to be like a sort of auction system out by the gate. I'm not sure I would have put a number on it, but I guess Delta kind of forced their hand. Anyway, it's a very competitive industry. That's one of the things that's behind all this, isn't it? That maybe they've sliced customer service levels so much to reduce the prices, and maybe that's come back to hit them. And that's why business is so inherently linked into communications, and why these things you can't divorce the two. So the big takeaway for me is how important PR people are. So that's got to be good for us and for you, Anne, as well. So, Frank, let's talk a little bit about an interesting people move. Jeff Pullman gone over to Samsung.
Yeah, really interesting. He's, of course, a veteran of Fleischman Hillard and a longtime veteran of CNBC. He is joining Samsung at a really interesting time. So if you look at the Harris poll, in 2016 they were in the top 10 on the list, and now they're down in the mid-40s someplace, and that's of course due to exploding phones. And the airline industry didn't exactly help out.
No, every single plane you get on still, you have to hear the negative message about Samsung. They must be pulling their hair out.
Yeah, so he's joining them at an interesting time. He is taking over Jeffrey Bowen's role with a different title. A lot of challenges ahead for him in this job.
Yeah, definitely. And the NFL draft is this evening. It's a massive deal for a lot of people. But increasingly brands have been trying to insert themselves in that process.
And more you have to keep your eye, not so much on the TV ads, but the social media elements around the draft, and the quirky, in-the-moment things that brands are doing. And even well-established brands that are NFL partners, like Tide, for instance, did some interesting things with Taylor a couple of years ago around the draft. So this year, some fun ones. There is a tight end from, he's the guy that's on the line and he blocks sometimes and other times.
Thanks for explaining that to the English.
So,
I appreciate it.
I'm right there with you.
His last name is Butt, B-U-T-T. So naturally, Charmin has dumped a lot of toilet paper on his front lawn. Be interesting to see where he goes. And there is another guy named Forrest Lamp who has...
Forrest Lamp?
Lamp, L-A-M-P, and has signed a deal already with a lamp and lighting fixture company.
Oh,
So
okay.
some quirky stuff, some fun stuff to start. Of course, there are the bigger deals with Under Armour and Nike and all these things. But
Yeah, good. So you're up in Boston, and what's your team?
The Patriots, but that's
Uh-oh,
about
you're
it.
not allowed to say that in New York.
You
Come
know
on.
what? I'm mostly a fan because Tom Brady's just so darn handsome.
Oh, well, okay, yeah. We can't really take away from that one yet. Actually, I remember the first time they won the Super Bowl because my sister lives up there, and went out to greet the team, and it was, I think, the coldest weather I've ever experienced. But there were literally like 2 million people on the streets of Boston. I think it was the first time they'd won anything for. They've had a massive run since then on baseball as well, but that was the first thing they'd won for decades. So it was.
We're crazy.
It was very. People were very excited. But Frank, the draft. I don't get this thing. This is about evening.
What don't you get?
Well, it's about evening up all. It's very democratic. I must admit. So you don't just have the biggest and best and richest teams buying up all the best players.
Right.
The draft is aimed at sort of evening things
Yes,
up so that
so
these smaller
the-
teams or less successful teams can get some of
yes.
the better players.
The teams that finish last in the regular season
Get
get
the
the
first
earliest picks. Now, of course, it's not an exact science. There are trades and there are things like that, and the teams move around. And only the first round is tonight, and then the second round is tomorrow, and it wraps up through the weekend.
Yeah, it's interesting because well, it's nothing to do with comms really, but anyway, because you don't have relegation, do you? You don't.
No.
If people come at the bottom of their division, they don't get
No,
relegated, and then
yeah.
another team comes up.
We're stuck with the Browns for the future, aren't we? So.
All right. Well, listen. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Anne. Great to chat to you, and really looking forward to seeing how Fearless Girl develops. That was a fantastic campaign, and yeah, as I say, you can read more about it in June's issue. But apart from that, don't forget our Brand Film Festival next week on May the 4th in New York. It's going to be a fantastic event. We've got Armando Bo headlining there. He's an Academy Award-winning and Golden Globes Award-winning screenwriter and a film director. And we've got a great lineup of content actually in the afternoon too, which is free. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, you can see the people behind BMW's Escape film and the Chief Creative Officer at GE, and we've got Nancy Mann from L'Oreal. So that's going to be a great afternoon, and then we'll go into the festival in the evening. Great events. We do it in conjunction with Campaign, our sister title that covers advertising. Week after in London, it's our Global Awards on May the 11th. So if you're in Europe, hopefully you can join us for that. But apart from that, have a good week, and we'll see you next time on the PR Week.